on with the Hardy Boys, The Secret Warning. I started reading this, I think it was last fall. It's been a while, and I've had a lot of requests to continue reading it, so today's the day that I do that. Now I've got some lovely Chicka kettle corn, sweet and salty, and some black cherry pop from the pop shop. Okay, so here we go. Here we go, The Secret Warning of the Hardy Boys. Chapter 5, The Golden Pharaoh. Awestruck by the weird red light signals, the boys sat, hunched in their seats, as the sleuth plowed onward through the darkness towards Whalebone Island. Joe was the first to break their stunned silence. I don't get it. Was that meant as a warning for us to stay away from the island, or an order to someone to keep us away? What's the difference, moaned Chet. Either way, we're asking for trouble if we go ahead and land at that spooky place. Joe, who knew his friend's sterling qualities could be depending upon a tight spot, reached out and gave Chet a reassuring whack. Relax, Strongheart, Joe chuckled. A spook wouldn't stand a chance against a beefy bruiser like you. Well, no. Well, I will vote we head back to the mainland. Take it easy, Frank said soothingly. Remember, Dad will be on the island to meet us. The Hardys knew from the mystery map and their chart that Whalebone Island was shaped like a crescent. It curved from southwest to northeast, with the outward bulge to the north. Frank steered for the southern horn of the crescent. As the splash of breakers told him they were nearing land, he cut the engine and allowed the sleuth to drift the rest of the way to shore. An eerie silence fell over the island. It was broken only by the faint sighting of the night breeze and the sounds of the surf. When they had reached the shallows, Joe kicked off his sneakers and climbed over the side to help beach the boat among some reeds. When they were safely ashore, Chet said, "Now what?" "We'll cut across the tip of the island to the cove, Frank said, "and meet Dad." The boys made their way over a ridge of dunes, topped by scrub. On the other side lay the inward curve of the crescent, indented by a sheltered cove near the center. A small blaze flickered on the beach. "Dad's campfire," Joe exclaimed. The boys hurried along the shore, but as they got closer, they could see no one at the fire. Vaguely alarmed, they broke into a sprint, forgetting all caution. Reaching the campfire, they saw that a stoutly built boat with an outboard motor had been drawn up on the sand. Near the fire lay a sleeping bag, supplies, cooking utensils, and a shortwave transceiver. "That's Dad's radio," said Frank. The boys stared through the darkness. If Mr. Hardy was concealed among the scattered trees and brush, he gave no sign of his presence. Joe gave the Hardys' special whistle and repeated several times, but there was no reply. "Hey, maybe saw those signals. I went to the lighthouse to investigate," Joe said in a hushed voice. "Perhaps he sent the signals himself to warn us away," Chet conjectured. "Could be," said Frank. "We'd better go there and take a look." The brothers had brought powerful flashlights, but used them as little as possible in making the way across the island. The terrain was humped to low hills, fringed with patches of stunted oak and pine. At the northern horn of the crescent, the land rose to a rocky eminence topped by the Whalebone light. Curiously, the trio approached the forbidding stone tower, trying to keep their feet from scrunching on the grit and gravel. Frank tried the door, then pushed it open. Something blocked it. Partway, an obstruction that yielded slightly as they shoved harder. Frank inserted his head and right shoulder into the opening and switched on the flashlight. "Dad," he cried out. Joe squeezed in behind his brother, and Chet followed. The beam of Frank's flashlight revealed the figure of Mr. Hardy sprawled on the concrete floor. A thin trickle of red from his scalp had clotted across the left temple. "Someone knocked him out," Frank said worriedly. The three eyes applied to their father's forehead and chafed his wrists, Mr. Hardy began to revive. Joe, Frank. Hi, Chet. The detective gave them a rueful smile, then slowly raised himself to a sitting position. What happened, Dad? Asked Frank. Mr. Hardy frowned and rubbed his hand over his eyes. Let me see. Oh, yes. Those red light signals from the tower here. We saw them too, declared Chet. So did I from the campsite on the other side. From the other side of the island. Mr. Hardy went on slowly. I came over to investigate, opened this doorway, and wham! How do you feel now? Joe inquired. Not too bad, except for this throbbing lump. Lucky for me, I have a thick skull. The boys helped Fenton Hardy to his feet. Then began a search of the tower. They checked every floor up to the lantern room, but the assailant had vanished. Warily, the detective and three youths traveled back to the island to his camp on the cove. The fire had long since burned down to glowing embers. After it had been replenished with driftwood and dry brush, Frank showed his father the cablegram from Egypt and the map which had been sent to the mail by R. Rogers. What's this pharaoh's head you're supposed to be aware of, Dad? Asked Joe. It's a solid gold bust of the Egyptian pharaoh, or emperor, Ramadan IV, valued at $1 million. Chet let out an odd whistle. $1 million? Wow. Where is this head, Mr. Hardy? A good question, Chet. The detective replied wryly. I'd better start at the beginning. About 2 weeks ago, a freighter named the KETTLE sank off the coast. Maybe you fellows recall hearing about it on the news. Several of the crew, including the purser, drowned. It was rammed in the fog by some cruise liner, wasn't it? Said Frank. That's right, by the Corona. Well, the spot where the freighter went down was just a couple of miles north of Whalebone Island. Mr. Hardy explained that the KETTLE had been carrying not only cargo, but also a dozen passengers. One of them, a foreign art dealer named Zufar, who had boarded the ship at Bayport in the Middle East. Zufar was bringing the golden pharaoh's head with him. The detective continued, to sell to a customer in New York. And the head was allegedly in the ship's strong room where the KETTLE sank. Zufar had lodged a claim with Transmarine Underwriters, the line's insurance company, for $1 million. The news stories on the sinking never mentioned the pharaoh's head, did they? Joe asked. No, as a security precaution, Zufar had purposely avoided any publicity about the treasure, and since sinking the line, had also tried to keep the matter out of the news for the same reason. You said the head was allegedly in the ship's strong room, said Frank. Is there some doubt about it? Well, that's where the mystery comes in, and that's why Transmarine has engaged me to investigate the case, Mr. Hardy explained. They'd been tipped off that a gold head of Ramadan IV is secretly being offered for sale. Was the tip on the level? Joe asked. So far we don't know. I've been checking it out, but may not know the answer till divers get at the KETTLE strong room. Meantime, the tip brings up a number of interesting possibilities. Right, said Frank. The head being offered for sale might be a fake. Either that or the one that went down with the KETTLE was a phony. Mr. Hardy smiled at the rapid-fire deductions as Joe added, maybe the treasure already has been salvaged from the sunken hulk. Chet joined in. Hey, that might not have been on the ship at all. Exactly, said Mr. Hardy. It may have been filched from the KETTLE back in Beirut, or even in Le Havre, France, where she stopped before the crossing to New York. Frank grinned and inquired, how come you are so interested in the legend of Whalebone Island, Dad? Because I have a feeling it may tie in with Frank bent down close to peer at the map. And those trees form an arrowhead, triangle pointing right at that spot. Mr. Hardy rubbed his jaw. I'm wondering if we should investigate now or wait till morning. I feel a lot better knowing you knocked me out, and just where he's lurking. If you ask me, that's a good reason for checking out the X mark right now, said Joe. Suppose something fell. Dad, the person who called you may be after it, and he might just snatch it during the night. You have a point there, son, said the detective. The detective conceded. Very well. If you're all willing, that's a cool look. Dousing their campfire, the group headed inland. Beyond the screen of trees sheltering the cove, the ground rose slightly, then flattened again amid a tangle of brush that made their going difficult in the darkness. Presently, Frank halted and touched his father's arm. Look, there must be the 3 trees. Those must be the 3 trees, Dad. His beam, moving back and forth, showed 3 trees, 3 scrubby trees positioned like the points of a triangle. Mr. Hardy nodded. No doubt about it. Those bumps on the skyline up there are 2 shallow hills. The 4 advanced cautiously past the trees. In a few moments they came to the brink of the steep ravine cut between the hills. They began climbing down the slope into the gully. Joe shifted his flashlight to his left hand in order to seize hold of some underbrush and steady his descent. As the yellow beam veered toward the left bank of the ravine, he let out a sudden startled yell. Look, there's somebody. The others turned hastily, but their figure darted out of sight. Where did you go? Mr. Hardy asked. Among that shrubbery, I didn't get a good look, but those words were drowned out by a terrific blast. The left wall of the ravine exploded with a shattering force. So that's chapter 5. Very good popcorn. I like this low light for atmosphere, but it's hard to read sometimes. Okay, so chapter 6. The Madman's Scroll. The blast knocked the sluice flat against rock, and earth showered down upon them. Are you all right, boys? Gasped Fenton Hardy. 3 voices reassured him. Frank lay on his flashlight. When he pulled it free, the beam still shone. Joe's light had been buried somewhere in the debris. Whew! Chet gulped as he struggled upright. Feels like I just got creamed by a whole football line. Let's get out of here, Mr. Hardy said. Shaking the dust from their clothes, the 4 clambered back up to level ground. Frank turned and shot his beam down to the ravine, the bottom of which was heaped with rubble. That fellow you saw, Joe, what did he look like? I hardly had time to see his face at all, Joe replied, but 2 things I did notice were a red beard and a black coat. Jack groaned. The Jolly Roger ghost again. I doubt if ghosts are capable of planting explosives, Mr. Hardy said dryly. It was probably the same person who hit me. Think we should try to hunt him down, Dad? Asked Frank, aiming his flashlight beam toward the brush-covered hillside left of the ravine. No, we wouldn't stand a chance of finding him in this darkness. Worse yet, we'd make easy targets. Better switch your light off, son. For that matter, we'd be sitting ducks around the campfire, Joe. Reasoned. True enough. Which is why we're not going to risk it, said Mr. Hardy. Our safest bet is to hole up in the lighthouse until morning. After that, we can decide our next move. Under cover of the darkness, the group made their way slowly northeast towards a whalebone lighthouse, using the dim outline of the tower as a direction guide. Not until they reached the lighthouse did Joe noticed that one of their party was missing. "Hey, where's Chet?" he exclaimed, wheeling about. All three Hardys peered back anxiously. The way they had come, the glow of the misty half-moon lay in the sky, unveiling no sign of Chet. They exchanged glances of dismay. Had somebody bushwhacked Chet? "Joe and I'll go back and find him," Frank said. "Not without me," their father replied. Stealthy as Indians, the trio began to retrace their steps. Frank and Joe moved cautiously at their father's side, sick with fear that any moment might discover their pal's motionless body. They had just reached a dense thicket of shrubbery near the ravine when a crackling noise caused them to halt abruptly. "Hit the ground," Mr. Hardy murmured. Silently, the three sleuths, flattened themselves in the brush. The noise came closer, and the form of a man materialized out of the gloom. Without hesitation, Joe hurled himself through the darkness. There was a grunt of impact, and he butted against solid flesh. Joe felt a heavy stick swish past his ear and whack him hard on the shoulder. He went down a tangle of arms and legs just as Frank snapped up the flashlight. "Hey, what's the big idea? You guys trying to ambush me or something?" "Chet," Frank grasped. Grinning ruefully, Joe got up while Frank helped Chet to his feet. Mr. Hardy was already retrieving several cans, a squashed loaf of bread, and other supplies which lay scattered over the ground. "Where the dickens have you been, Chet?" "As we couldn't guess," Frank said. "Well, that's the idea of trying to brain me with that stick," he added. "You think I'd be dopey enough to let that red-whiskered nut jump me without being set for him?" Chet retorted. Mr. Hardy found it difficult to restrain a smile. "Good for you, Chet, but did you have... You did. I was pretty worried. Disappearing like that without a word of explanation." Chet gulped. "I was afraid you wouldn't let me if I asked to go back for grub. But, well, gosh, how could we get through that whole night without something to eat? I haven't had a thing since lunch." Joe chuckled. You put away enough lamb chops at Captain Early's to hold you for a week." "Oh yeah, I only had 4 of those little bitty things." "All the same, Mr. Hardy," putting on a straight face, "it was a foolish risk going back to the campfire after what happened." "I didn't go back there," Chet explained. "I got this stuff from the sleuth." "Okay. I guess we can all use some food," Frank said. "Now let's make tracks for the lighthouse." Although the whalebone light had been abandoned 2 years before, the keeper's living quarters still contained various furnishings: a battered table and chairs, a cast-iron stove, and a glass-chimneyed kerosene lamp. The storeroom below contained 2 rusty lanterns and several tins of oil and kerosene, evidently left for the use of stranded fishermen. With the tower door currently barred behind them, the group soon cooked a tasty supper and fell to with keen appetites. Afterwards, they sat around the table talking. "Can you tell us more, Dad, of why you were interested in the legend of Whalebone Island?" said Frank. "A good detective," Mr. Hardy replied, "should always be concerned when something odd happens at or near the scene of the case he's investigating." "You mean something strange went on before tonight?" Joe asked. "Yes, several days ago. I saw an item in the newspaper about a fisherman who reported being scared out of his wits by the ghost of Whalebone Island when he put in one evening." Frank said, "So you were suspecting that something funny might be going on here?" "Exactly. It seemed far more likely that the so-called ghost might be someone who was using the circumstances of the legend as a cover-up for some secret activity, and of course to scare people away from the island." "What kind of secret stuff?" Chet asked. "Somebody might be using the island as a base for diving operations to the Catawba, which would explain why the golden pharaoh's head was secretly being offered for sale," Joe declared. "Not only that," said Mr. Hardy, "the Catawba's hulk is vitally important for another reason. You see, there's a fortune in lawsuits at stake over the losses and injuries suffered in the collision, particularly claims being brought by relatives of those who lost their lives. But how does that make the sunken hulk so important? Joe questioned. The Catawba's master claims his ship was stopped dead in the night after they picked up an approaching vessel on radar. If he's right, Transmarine is free and clear of responsibility. But the captain of the Corona alleges that the Catawba was proceeding at full speed in spite of the fog, in which case Transmarine could be liable for several $1 million in damages, not even counting the loss of the Pharaoh's head. And the Angelis aboard the sunken freighter put in Frank right with the engine room telegraph and tachometer. Mr. Hardy answered, if the telegraph shows stop and the tachometer reads 0, the Catawba's not at fault. If they indicate full speed ahead, it's a different story. A difference worth several $1 million. Joe gave a low whistle. Some difference. Suddenly Frank snapped his fingers. That mention of diving reminds me, Dad, and all the excitement about the pirate map. We clean forgot to tell you about the visit you had this morning. He quickly described Gus Boggs' appearance at the Hardy Boys' home and the threat which the diver had uttered before leaving. Mr. Hardy took the news calmly. I'll think I have to answer that. He explained that Transmarine underwriters had asked him to run a security check on several competing diving companies before letting the contract to salvage the Catawba. Gus Boggs, the sleuth went on, is chief diver for an outfit called Simon Salvage Company. They tried hard to get the contract, even put in a ridiculously low bid, but the company has a shady reputation. They've been involved in outright fights and several other unsavory incidents on salvage jobs, so I advised against them. Instead, Mr. Hardy told the boys he had recommended that a contract go to the Crux Diving Company. As a result, Gus Boggs was no doubt out for revenge. How about what happened tonight? Chet said, looking around the table uneasily. Do you think Boggs or Simon Salvage was behind that explosion in the ravine? It's a cinch the map was just bait to lure us there, Joe declared. I agree, said Fenton Hardy. The real question is who sent it, and who's been posing as a Red Rogers ghost. What's our next move, Dad? Frank asked. Come daylight, we'll search the island for clues to the person who tried to kill us. After that, we'd all better return to the mainland. I have to get back to work with Sam Radley, tracing that tip on the Pharaoh's head. Next morning, while Chet Morton and Mr. Hardy were preparing breakfast, Frank and Joe started the winding staircase to the tower to check the lamp room for possible traces of the person who had sent the red warning signals. As they neared the top, Frank suddenly halted and pointed to the wall. Look at that, Joe. A message, faded and almost illegible, had been scrawled in pencil on the whitewashed surface of the stone. It said, I've seen Roger again. No mistake this time. He's come back and he's trying to drive me out of my mind. Heaven help me. R.H. Tang, 4/17/45. Okay, so that's chapter 6. Very good popcorn. Linda and I have a friend. She makes the best kettle corn. It's amazing. Okay. doctor said, Frank said slowly, if he was suffering from hallucinations. Joe stared at his brother. Are you implying that Tang wasn't crazy? Suppose, he told the doctor, we'd seen the Jolly Roger ghost, a redneck spook, in a black coat, and not just here but on Whalebone Island, but even back in Bayport. Would he call us crazy? The explosion last night wasn't our imagination, said Joe flatly. Maybe, but that wouldn't prove we had or hadn't seen a ghost. Still, Joe persisted. Tang must have been examined before he could be declared insane. True, but the question is, what really drove him out of his mind? Frank argued, suppose you or I cooped up in this tower alone for weeks and months. Not another soul on the island. So as far as we knew, yet every time we went for a walk to stretch our legs, that spook kept popping out at us, especially at night, maybe even inside the lighthouse. I'll bet we'd be flipping our wigs before long. Joe frowned reflectively, then blurted out, but good night, Frank. All that was years ago. The person Tang saw couldn't have been the same one we saw. And Joe's voice trailed off. Frank gave a chuckle. You mean you couldn't? That's the same question I'm asking myself. The lamp room had been empty since the whalebone light was taken out of service. The boys inspected it thoroughly but found no clues to the signaler. He must have used an ordinary bullseye lantern. Let's try the outside platform and see if... Joe broke off with a gasp. Hey Frank, what's the matter? Look here out to sea. Lying off the southern shore of the island was a small steamer. Larger than a tug, it was equipped with cargo booms. The two boys dashed to the floor below and outside to the rail platform around the light tower. It's not underway, Joe observed. What do you think it's doing out there? Could be a fishing vessel, Frank said, doubtfully, but sure doesn't look at one. Let's ask Dad. On hearing the news, Mr. Hardy and Chet hurried topside. The detective broke out his powerful binoculars and focused on the mysterious vessel. It's a salvage ship, Mr. Hardy said tensely. It belongs to the Simon Salver Company. Gus Box outfit, exclaimed Joe. Mr. Hardy passed the binoculars to the boys. Each of the three in turn examined the vessel. The name of its stern read Simon Salver, New York. On deck, a diver had apparently just suited up. Helpers were closing the glass ports of his helmet and checking out the air hose and telephone cable. As Frank watched, the diver strode to the side of the ship and climbed down the ladder into the water. That must be Block himself, Frank muttered. But what's he doing out there, Dad? You said that the Catawba were down north of the island, didn't you? Mr. Hardy frowned. That's right, and I can't figure Simon Salvage engaging in a diving operation just for the fun of it. I wonder when the ship arrived, Joe mused. We didn't see it last night. Maybe it was on the other side of the island, put in Chet. Suddenly a look of comprehension crossed his face. Uh-oh, you think maybe somebody off that ship was the dynamiter last night? Sure, and also the one who flashed those red signals, Joe replied. It's possible, all right. Mr. Hardy agreed. Dad, I have an idea, Frank explained. Let's hear it, son. When you go back to mainland, why don't three of us stay on the island? We can watch the Simon Salver and maybe find out what it's up to, and also keep a lookout for the ghost. Mr. Hardy looked troubled. He shook his head. That would be dangerous, Frank. There's no telling what might happen with a possible killer at large. And Frank and Joe pleaded earnestly. Mr. Hardy finally promised to wait until they searched the island before making a final decision. After breakfast, they scoured the whalebone crescent from tip to tip, but the ghostly dynamiter had apparently slipped away during the night. The detective was now half inclined to let the boys stay. When they approached the cove campsite at the end of the search, Fenton Hardy stopped short and blanched. My camp's been ransacked. The four rushed toward, scattered across the sand were the smashed fragments of what had been But suddenly Frank's sharp eye spotted the craft. There it is, he said, pointing offshore. The boat lay bottom up in a few feet of water, a gaping hole in its hull. Fenton Hardy's jaw tightened grimly. That settles, he said. You boys are not staying on this island. We're going back in the sleuth together if our ghost hasn't wrecked that too. Anxiously, they trekked back to the southern tip of the island. All four heaved sighs of relief when they found the sleek motorboat still safely hidden among the reeds. Before leaving, they cruised back to the cove to salvage the outboard motor for Mr. Hardy's stove-in craft. Chet, using the binoculars, saw a man on the bridge of the Simon Salver, watching them intently through a telescope. Later, as the sleuth putted out of the cove, the Salver moved away from the shore, not taking a chance on us coming up to snoop, Joe observed. The Bayporters head back to the mainland at a fast clip. Ashore, Mr. Hardy reported the loss of the rented craft of the boat livery and returned the waterlogged outboard engine. The owner took the news philosophically. Don't matter too much. She was insured, he said. Have to hold your deposit though till I settle with the insurance company. The detective nodded and then asked, by the way, you wouldn't happen to know if any boat put in here during the night or maybe early this morning? You figure that might have been the party who scuttled your boat? The lively man squinted shrewdly at Mr. Hardy. So happens I did hear one coming back last night. Troy Lawson's livery down the wharf and ways. It's the only other boat rental place in town. Mr. Hardy thanked him, then strode past the wharf with the three boys. At the other boat livery, the investigator repeated his question to the proprietor, Eli Lawson. Sure, there was a boat come in, Lawson said grumpily. Must have been sometime between midnight and 4 o'clock. It was a boat that had been stolen from me the night before. Stolen, Mr. Hardy exclaimed. Frank and Joe looked at each other excitedly. More than likely, the boat thief had been the island ghost. How come you're so interested? Lawson asked the detective. Mr. Hardy told briefly how his rented boat had been sabotaged on Whaleboat Island, but said nothing about the rest of the night's events. Say, by any chance is your name Fenton Hardy? One proprietor inquired. That's right. Why? Lawson went into the boathouse and emerged a moment later holding a soiled envelope. When I found the boat this morning, this was lying on top of the seats. The envelope bore the name Fenton Hardy, lettered in pencil. The detective opened it and took out the enclosed note. His face hardened as he read. Then he handed the message to the boys that said, "Keep away from Whalebone Island. Next time you won't escape." Instead of a signature, there was a crude drawing of Egyptian-looking heads surmounted by a pharaoh's headdress. The pharaoh's head, Chet gulped. Frank and Joe silenced him with warning looks, and Mr. Hardy thanked the liveryman. The four walked away with Lawson's inquisitive gaze. Is that what the golden head of Ramadan looks like, Dad? Frank inquired when they were out of earshot. Yes, almost exactly. I've seen a photograph of it. The boys accompanied Mr. Hardy to the parking lot where he left his car overnight. It was decided that Frank and Joe would return to Bayport with Chet and wait for the arrival of Sam Radley. I'll send Sam back from the Philadelphia as soon as I can spare him. The investigator promised that we can go to Whalebone Island with you. Right, Dad? Mr. Hardy climbed into his car and sped off in the direction of the turnpike. Frank, Joe, and Chet embarked in the sleuth and were soon cruising down the coast toward Barnett Bay. It was late in the day when Hardy boys arrived home, and Gertrude's face was anxious as she greeted them. Well, thank goodness you're home at last. Why didn't you answer my radio call last night? Sorry, Andy, Frank apologized. We were away from the sleuth most of the time. Anything wrong? Joe asked. Indeed, there was. Someone tried to break into the house. Okay. So that's chapter 7. Little popcorn break. Chapter 8, Egyptian Fake. An attempted break-in while they were gone. Startled, Frank and Joe wondered about the thief, what he had been after. Tell us about it, Aunt Gertrude, Frank said. Well, to begin with, I was all alone in the house. Alone? What about Mother? Joe broke in. She was called away yesterday afternoon. Miss Hardy explained to stay with a sick friend over in Bartonsville. Miss Filer, Lars Filer, that is, Laura's old schoolmate. Well, I was sound asleep and suddenly the burglar alarm went off full blast. The boy's aunt shuddered at the recollection. Heavens, it must have wakened the whole neighborhood. That shrill racket and all the floodlights blazing on. Did you get a look at whoever touched it off? Frank asked. No, I rushed to stick my head out the window, but the rascal was nowhere in sight. Probably ran off the instant the lights went on. Miss Hardy eyed her nephew severely. I tried at once to contact you two or Fenton on the radio, but got no answer. We are holed up in a lighthouse with a spook after us, Joe explained. Huh. His aunt gave him a suspicious glare through her spectacles. But that it was May, I was here all alone. Helpless, I might have been murdered in my sleep. The boys managed to mollify her by complimenting her on her courage and presence of mind. Did you call the police, Auntie? Frank asked. Naturally, but they found no footprints, no clues of any kind. Suddenly, she again looked annoyed, which reminds me the curator called from the New Art Museum. Mr. Scath? Frank asked, immediately interested. What did he want? Wouldn't tell me. Just asked to speak to Fenton or one of you, Miss Hardy sniffed. I suppose he thought not being in the detective business I wasn't bright enough to take a message. I doubt that, Aunt Gertrude. Grinning, Frank went to the phone and called the Howard Museum. In a few moments he reached Mr. Scath. Glad you called, Frank, the curator said. Something rather odd has come up. Since your father serves as our security advisor, I thought I'd better pass the word along. What's it about, sir? Mr. Scath explained that he had received a telephone call just before lunch. The man wouldn't give his name, but warned me that someone might contact the museum soon and tried to sell me a fake Egyptian art object. Frank's eyebrows shot up. Did he say who this phony was, or what the object would be? No hint at all. In fact, he hung up before I could ask any questions. Thanks for letting us know, Mr. Scath, said Frank. Dad's out of town right now, but that tip could be very important. If any such art faker does show up, I'd appreciate it if you let us know right away. I'll certainly do that. After completing the call, Frank told his brother the news. Wow, a fake Egyptian art object, Joe exclaimed. It would be an imitation of the pharaohs that Dad's looking for. Just what I was thinking, Frank said. The Hardy boys decided to sleep downstairs, in case the unknown prowler might make another attempt to break into the house. But the night passed without incident. The next morning, the two boys decided to go to the beach for a swim. Let's stop off at Chet's and see if he wants to come, Joe suggested. Under a blaze of dazzling sunshine, they started off in their convertible. Presently, they turned up at a dirt lane that led to the Morton farmhouse just outside of Bayport. Two girls were seated on the front porch. Iola, Chet's pixie-faced, dark-haired sister, was Joe's favorite date. She hopped up from the porch, swing, to greet the visitors. Hi, you two ghost hunters. Her friend Callie Shaw, a pretty brown, blonde girl, chimed in. What's the latest on the whalebone spook? Last we heard, he needed a shave, said Frank, climbing out of the car and smiling at Callie, whom he liked very much. Where's Strong Heart? Joe asked. At that moment, Chet burst out through the screen door, munching on a large Danish pastry. Someone called me. Oh, hi, fellows. What's that, breakfast or lunch? Frank asked with a grin. Iola laughed with Chet. There's no hard and fast distinction. Ah, cut it out, the chubby youth said good-naturedly. I'm just finishing breakfast, he added to the Hardys. Slept late, that's all. Who wouldn't after that rugged expedition you guys roped me into? Okay, you're excused, Frank said, but we got your trunks. We're going to the beach. You girls like to come? Joe asked casually. We'd love to, but how can we? Said Callie. We have to put our hair up for the party. What party? Frank asked. What party? This afternoon at Biff Hooper's. Don't tell me you forgot. The Hardys exchanged blank looks, then recalled Biff's word-of-mouth invitation during the Sandlot baseball game last Monday afternoon. The Hoopers were leaving Friday on a 2-week vacation trip to California, so Biff had decided to have a going-away party on Thursday. The affair was to be an early barbecue supper, since he and his parents had to pack and prepare for a 7 o'clock takeoff the next morning. I guess we did forget, Joe admitted. We've been sort of busy. Sure, we know, Iola said, dimpling. Incidentally, Bill told us yesterday that he had a surprise announcement to make at the party. Announcement about what? Iola threw her hands. Don't ask me. It all sounded very mysterious. Maybe he was just trying to whet our curiosity. Just as long as he doesn't whet Chet's appetite, Joe needled. Everyone laughed, and Chet went back in the house to get his swim trunks. The Hardys could hear the sound of a telephone ring. A few moments later, as they were chatting with the girls, Mrs. Morton put her head out the back door. Frank and Joe. Yes, Mrs. Morton, your aunt just phoned. You asked me to tell you that Mr. Scraft, the museum, called again. Some man was on his way to the house to see you. The boys jumped to their feet. Did Aunt Gertrude say who he was? Frank asked. No, but I guess it must be urgent. She advised you both to come home at once. As they were thanking Chet's mother for the information, Chet returned holding a rolled towel under one arm. What's the matter? He inquired plaintively. Is the swim off? Maybe not, said Frank. Come on back to the house with us. We can whip over the beach as soon as Joe and I talk to this visitor, whoever he is. The three boys climbed in the convertible and sped back to the Hardy home at High and Elm Streets, where they hurried into the kitchen. What's up, Auntie? Joe inquired. Did Mr. Scath tell you he was coming to see us, or why? Miss Hardy looked up from the pie dough. She was rolling a pursed lips. He didn't, and I'm sure I have no idea of the reason for his visit, since none of you have been fit to take me into your confidence about this mystery. The boys' grins faded as the front doorbell rang. Frank and Joe hurried to answer it. The caller was a fat, balding, dark-complexioned man in a white silk suit. Is this the Hardy residence? He asked. Yes, please come in, Frank said. The man stepped inside and handed the boys an ornate visiting card which read, Mekamet Zalfar, dealer in the Middle Eastern antiquities and objects art, Cairo, Egypt. Frank and Joe glanced at the card, then looked at each other excitedly. Their visitor was the owner of the Golden Pharaoh's head. Going on to chapter 9. Chapter 9, The Shattered Cat. I should like to see Mr. Fenton Hardy, the detective said. I should like to see Mr. Fenton Hardy, the detective, said the stout visitor. Joe found himself staring with fascination at the man's tiny black mustache, which twirled upwards at each end. Our father's out of town just now, working on a case, Frank exclaimed. If you have a chair and tell us why you came, perhaps we can help. Matt Zufar glared irritably, but nonetheless seated himself in the living room. Plucking out a handkerchief, he dabbed he dabbed the beads of perspiration from his dark forehead. My dear young man, Zufar snapped, Fenton Hardy was recommended to me as the ablest private investigator in America. In fact, I was referred to him on a matter of the utmost importance by Mr. Scath, the museum curator. I did not come to deal with the boys. Frank said evenly, I just thought we might help. If you'll tell us what you want, Frank, Joe put in, we'll inform Dad as soon as we can get in touch with him. Zufar glared for a moment and said abruptly, my card, please. The art dealer fished a gold pencil from the inside pocket and jotted something on the back of the card. Mr. Hardy is free, he said. Please have him contact me at this address in New York. With his final swipe of his handkerchief, Salver clapped his straw hat back on his glistening dome and rose to depart. May we call you a taxi? Frank offered. No, thank you. My car's outside. The stout man stalked off without another word. As the door closed behind him, Frank and Joe dashed to the front window for a better view. They saw Salver climb into a black limousine. A hulking granite-faced chauffeur slammed the car door, returned to the wheel, and drove off. Who is that sour puss? Inquired Chet, coming up from behind the Hardys. The owner of the Golden Pharaoh, Joe replied. I'd sure like to know what he was so worked up about. He wouldn't tell us. Maybe Mr. Scath can give us the lowdown. Frank glanced at his watch. Come on. We can stop off at the museum on our way to the beach. 10 minutes later, the Hardys' convertible turned into the curving driveway of the Hard Museum, which stood well back from the street among landscape grounds. The three boys hurried up the broad marble steps of the ivy-clad building and went straight to the curator's office. Mr. Scath, a slender man with wispy strands of hair and rimless pince-nez, rose to get his visitors as they entered. Come in, boys, and sit down. I take it you've just talked to Mr. Salver. That's right, sir, said Frank, but he insisted on seeing Dad and wouldn't tell us what he wanted. We hoped you might fill us in. Yes. Well, he came here this morning and introduced himself as an art dealer specializing in Middle Eastern antiquities. Then he tried to interest me in a blue faience Egyptian cat dating back to the 20th century. Faience, Joe replied. What's that? Earthenware coated with an opaqueness glaze. Frank then asked the curator, did you tell Mr. Salver about the warning you received? That someone would try to sell you an Egyptian fake? Indeed I did. I told him so bluntly. Mr. Scath gave me a shrug of distaste. That result was quite upsetting. What happened? Frank asked. Salver became very emotional. He said that some enemy, he didn't know who, was trying to ruin his reputation. Meanwhile, Joe guessed the anonymous tip you received. Yes, and he said someone had evidently spread a similar rumor about a much valuable object which he had hoped to bring to this country. Frank bent forward eagerly. Did he mention what the object was? Not then, Mr. Scath replied, but he did later. A solid gold head of the pharaoh, Ramadan IV, valued at $1 million. Chet's eyes bulged. The curator went on. However, as I say, what came later at that moment, he was too worked up trying to convince me of a spotless reputation. Mr. Scath sighed. Anyway, Salver gave me various personal references to call and urged me to inspect the faience cat as carefully as I pleased. What did you do? Joe asked. Mr. Scath looked uncomfortable. I didn't quite know what to do. Finally, I called two of the references he gave me, another museum and a private collector. They both assured me that their dealings with the Salver had been entirely satisfactory. They both felt he was too keen to be taken in by a fake and wouldn't risk anything. Wouldn't risk trying to palm one off. How about the cat? Said Frank. Did you test it anyway? No, it seemed authentic. Salver offered to let me keep it for detailed examination, but I told him that we have no funds available for such a purchase at this time. The curator paused to polish his glasses. Then came a dreadful piece of bad luck. Salver went to put the cat back in the carrying case, but in his disturbed state he let slip from his fingers. Did the cat break? Chet blurted out. Shattered to bits, Mr. Scath shook his head unhappily. What follows was even worse. Salver himself went all to pieces. The curator related that Salver had begun pouring out his troubles. He told of the Golden Pharaoh's head, which had been lost when the Catwa sank. They heard that the ship line's insurance company thought he was trying to defraud them, because of some of the false rumors about a duplicate head. Did he strike you as putting on an act? Frank asked. I don't believe so. He said he's had nothing but bad luck ever since the gold treasure first came into his possession. Then he asked me to recommend a good detective agency to run down the scoundrel who was defaming him. Naturally, Mr. Scath ended, I suggested your father. Zufar still seemed pretty tense when he came to our place. Joe mused. How much is that Egyptian cat worth, Mr. Scath? Hard to say, but at least $500. Wow, Chet broke in. That's high price for Butterfingers. Incidentally, Mr. Scath went on, Zufar's tale of bad luck, well, may be true if you accept superstition. Frank said, how so? When the tomb of Ramadan IV was opened, a curse is supposed to fall on those who had violated the royal crypt. Mr. Scath explained, and the curse actually seemed to be fulfilled. The newspapers made much of it at the time. What happened, Joe asked. Soon after the discovery, the leader of the excavating party died of a heart attack, and several others in the party became ill or suffered accidents. Chet shifted uneasily. The Ramadan head eventually came into the possession of a wealthy Lebanese businessman in Beirut. Mr. Scath went on, he was later ruined financially. Then when Zufar bought the head and was bringing it to this country, the ship sank. Frank said dryly, it seems to bear out the course all right, except I don't believe in ancient curses. Well, I'm not so sure I don't, Chet said. After thanking the curator, the boys left the museum, drove to the beach. An hour of swimming and sunbathing topped off by a lunch of hamburgers soon put even Chet in a more cheerful mood. At 4:30 that afternoon, the Hardy boys picked up Iola, Chet, and Kelly for Biff's barbecue. The Hoopers' wide yard, which sloped down to the pleasant woodsy creek, was already noisy with a gay chatter of boys and girls when the Hardy's group arrived. Eager shouts greeted them. Chet was promptly given the chef's hat and apron. This is my style, he said laughingly, and soon was busy stoking the portable grill. Biff, a tall, blonde, and wrangly youth, ambled towards his guest, handing out soft drinks. Then he cupped his big hands and bellowed for attention. Now hear this, you guys and gals. Suddenly Biff's jovial expression turned to one of dismay. Startled gasps and squeals came from the other guests too. Joe, look out, warned Tony Brito. Before Joe could react, something struck him hard in the back, sending him sprawling to the ground. Wow. So, chapter 10 is the next one. Now, I guess I should read that. It's the longest one. I'll read chapter 10. A four-legged menace. Hey, what gives? Joe sputtered. He tried to get up, but felt paws trampling his back. As he turned his head, a large white tongue licked him across the face. His assailant was an ungainly Great Dane. Down, Tivoli. Here, boy. Biff shouted as he ran to his guest's assistant. Everyone else was roaring with laughter. Joe finally struck to his feet. For Pete's sake, he gasped, wiping his face. Where'd that monster come from? He's no monster. He's my big surprise, said Biff, hanging out the large dog with both hands. I'll have you know, this magnificent creature comes from Champion Oof. Bill broke up with a grunt as the Dane pulled free from his grip and went bounding off among the young people. Hey, come here, I said. Come, Tivoli. The dog paid no attention. He pranced happily across the lawn, barging into several teenagers and spilling their soda pop. Biff pursued his pet, the Great Dane. He eluded him with nimbly and swivel-hipped quarterback. Watch it, Chet, Tony Brito shouted. He's going for the hot dogs. The party was in an uproar. Phil Cohen, at his frantic request, messed around the house and got a chain link training collar. With Frank helping, Biff finally put the collar around Tivoli's neck, but not before the dog had gulped 5 frankfurters and a package of hamburger meat. Don't you ever feed the poor thing, Tony joked. Feed him, Biff said indignantly. Listen, he's had 3 big meals already today. Then he added hastily, Tivoli's not really such a terribly big eater. A chorus of disbelieving laughs greeted his words. He's not, Biff insisted. It's just that he got half-starved when he was being shipped here, so now he's making up for lost time. Iola giggled. And how? I'll bet even Chet has a canary's appetite by comparison. You still haven't told us how you got him, Biff said. I'll say it again. You still haven't told us how you got him, Biff, said Jim Foy, a Chinese youth. I won him in a mail order contest. Biff exclaimed that he had submitted the winning slogan for a new cereal and received Tivoli as first prize. How old is the mutt? Asked Jerry Gilroy. Mutt, my eye. Biff retorted, this dog comes from a purebred stock. His father and mother were born both international champions, and Tivoli will be due someday. He's just 9 months old. 9 months, Chet echoed. Good night, he's as big as a colt already. How big will he be when he's full grown? Big enough to make the best watchdog in Bayport, Biff said proudly. He cleared his throat. I am. It was just a happens that Tivoli arrived at a bad time with us going on vacation, so I was about to announce, what if you lucky people could have the privilege of keeping this future chap while I'm gone? Another chorus of laughter rose. Did you say lucky? teased Callie. Does the offer include a cage? Phil asked. Afraid you're wasting your time, Biff, old pal. Add another boy. You have to board him at a kennel if you find one big enough. Summoning up a hearty Pitchman smile, Biff went on. Listen, gang. Think what an impression Tivoli will make when you take him out on a leash. Tony chuckled. You'll make an impression, all right. Everybody will run for cover. You have to admit he had a great guard dog. Bill persevered. Frank turned to Joe, and Biff remarked thoughtfully, you know, he's right. I've been worried about leaving Aunt Gertrude alone when we go back to Whalebone Island. In case that prowler shows up again, Tivoli might be just the answer. Joe nodded. You have a point there. Okay, Biff, Frank said in a louder voice, you've got yourself a deal. You mean you'll take him for 2 weeks? Biff gave a whoop of joy, and the other teenagers began crying around the Hardys to offer joking words of warning and advice. When the party broke up at 7:30, Frank and Joe drove Tivoli home in their convertible, with the top up and the windows raised. Rebecca went first to break the news gently. Frank says they parked in the driveway. Joe chuckled. We may need Tivoli to protect us. As the boys went in the front door, Aunt Gertrude came to the hallway. Did either of you know if your father was expecting some sort of shipment, she asked. A shipment, Joe said blankly. Of what? That's just what I'm trying to figure out. A crate came for him while you were gone. I didn't know what else to do with it, so I had the truck driver and his helper carried down to the basement. It's news to us, Auntie, said Frank. Let's take a look. Miss Hardy led the way down the cellar stairs. She pointed to a large wooden crate standing against the wall. It was about 4 feet high. Stenciled one-sided was the name Fenton Hardy and the address of the Hardy home. What about the receipt? Joe suggested. Wouldn't that tell us the contents? Oh dear, I forgot to ask for the carbon copy when I signed it, said Mr. Hardy. But anyway, the handwriting on the receipt was illegible. Didn't the driver know where the box came from? Frank asked. He said he picked it up at some New York warehouse. That was all he could tell us. Frank eyed the mysterious crate. Maybe we should call Dad. Oh, I didn't neglect that, said Miss Hardy. I tried to contact Fenton over the radio, but he didn't answer. No wonder his radio got Smashed in Whalebone Island, Joe explained. But we can probably call him at his hotel. As Joe picked up the basement extension telephone, his aunt said, well, you can also tell my man phoned at about 5 o'clock. He didn't leave any name. Joe placed the call to Philadelphia, but hung up with a shake was said a few minutes later. No luck. Dad and Sam were out here. Both out of their rooms. I left a message for them to call back. The Hardy boys looked at each other and then took deep breaths. Trying to sound casual, Frank said, we've brought a visitor, Aunt Gertrude. A visitor? Yes. He's come to stay with us for a couple of weeks. We're sure you're going to like him. Detecting something odd in Frank's tone, Miss Hardy swept her nephews with a suspicious glance. Well, speak up. Who is he and where is he? He's out in the car, Joe said. Auntie, he's a Great Dane. A Great Dane? Miss Hardy echoed unbelievably. You mean one of those huge dogs? Frank tried to be reassuring. Actually, he's not full grown, only 9 months old. Gertrude already launched into a vigorous tirade against the problem of tending large, untrained animals. Frank finally managed to explain why they brought Tivoli, guessing that he would serve as a watchdog while he and Joe were away. But that was just where do you expect me to keep the creature? Miss Hardy demanded. Certainly not in the house. Oh, don't worry about that, Auntie, Joe said, chuckling. Tivoli can stay out in the yard or down in the cellar. Well, he had better earn his board and keep, Aunt Gertrude commented tardily. With that, she marched upstairs to the kitchen. Joe glanced at his brother and rolled his eyes expressively. Well, let's bring in our visitor, Joe said, grinning. When the boys returned to the car, they found Tivoli uncontrollably lolling on the back seat, fast asleep. Joe jerked the ring at the end of the chain of the training collar. Come on, boy, we're going to introduce you to Aunt Gertrude. Tivoli preferred not to be disturbed. Only the combined physical persuasion of Joe and Frank succeeded in dislodging him, and even then he proved skittish. Moments later, as they were hauling him to the back door, the boys heard a shriek from their aunt. What's wrong? Frank called out. Tivoli, now lunch from the kitchen, tugging the boys behind him. That prowler's back again, Miss Hardy's. Miss Hardy's eyes widened in the fridge at the sight of the Great Dane, but she kept on. I heard a noise back and saw a man dash across the yard. It's your big chance, Tivoli, go get him, Joe commanded. The two boys and the dog dashed out of the backyard. The prowler had vanished in the gathering dusk. Now, Tivoli strained towards the house, and the boys were forced to follow. Maybe the fellow dropped something or left a clue, and Tivoli spotted it by scent. Joe said hopefully. The real reason soon became evident as the Great Dane headed for the kitchen. Once inside, he strode towards the refrigerator and began sniffing at the door. Aunt Gertrude gave the boys a withering glance. A fine watchdog he'll make. Resolutely, she advanced on Tivoli. Outside this instant, the dog regarded her with his pale yellow eyes. He made no move to obey, and a faint mumble sounded in his throat. Miss Hardy stood her ground. Frank and Joe, she said, take this creature out of the house immediately. Her nephews complied and coaxed Tivoli into the backyard once more. Joe laughed. He's as iron-willed as Aunt Gertrude. Time will tell, Frank said philosophically. He got a length of chain from the garage and secured it to the end of Tivoli's collar and the other to a tree. Back in the kitchen, the boys had fixed the snack for themselves and Aunt Gertrude when a mournful howl assailed their ears. They looked at each other and glanced at Miss Hardy. Her face spoke volumes, but she said nothing. Tivoli continued to bay at the rising moon. Aunt Gertrude winced. The baying persisted without let-up. After several minutes, she pursed her lips and got up from the table. Very well. You'd better bring that so-called watchdog inside before the neighbors complain. Put him in the cellar, mind you. Frank and Joe did. They came back upstairs. Aunt Gertrude gave an indignant miff. Now perhaps you'll be able to get some rest. I, for one, am retiring. only his first day here. Frank took the Great Dane back to the cellar. Yawning, the boys switched off the lights, turned on the burglar alarm, and went to their rooms. Sometime later came the sound of paws padding up the staircase. Joe raised his head from the pillow incredulously. Good grief, Tivoli again. Apparently sniffing out his two protectors, the dog stalked in the boys' room. He leaped out of Joe's bed with a single bound and draped himself across the middle. Joe groaned. Oh, great. Well, I guess you might as well stay here so we can get some sleep. But at least give me a little room, you big lummox. Frank shook with stifled laughter. It was just past midnight when the boys were suddenly wakened by the loud barking noise of Tivoli from downstairs. They heard the dog snarl, then the sounds of a violent struggle. Come on, Frank exclaimed, jumping out of bed. Let's go find out what's going on. Okay, so that was chapter 10. Well, that book is coming along. I'll probably read about 5 chapters each time. About 5 or 6. Not sure if I did my shout out, but I have a shout out for Fabian Link. Fabian Link. A shout out to you, my friend. And a shout out to the rest of you as well. I love doing shout outs. I appreciate your patience. Because I pre-record my videos at a time, so you may not hear it for about a week or so. So, hopefully, Fabian Link stuck around for this shout out. Well, the Hardy Boys, The Secret Warning. I'll continue on at some other time. So in the meantime, thank you for tuning in, my friends. I love hearing from you. I love your comments. So you look after yourself, look after each other, and stay awesome. And we'll see you next time, okay? Bye now.